Nobody's listening, right? Well, Andy, if nobody was listening last week, I think we did. I'm proud of us. We put out maybe the most off-putting episode of a podcast we could. So now really no one's listening, I'm sure.
Because it was politics and we sound dumb?
It was politics, and I do believe I may have used a wide brush to paint Christians, those followers of Jesus Christ, in a way that actually I'm in no better place. I don't have grace in my heart this week because there are more trans bills have come out, anti-trans, and it makes my blood boil. So we'll not talk about that.
But if you're Christian, you're in the right place, is what we're saying.
But what I do want to say is we are putting this podcast out on our old feeds.
Yeah.
I want to direct people who are perhaps stumbled upon this on Totally Lame, that you really want to be where Totally Married is from here to forth.
Because that feed's going to become the definitive feed.
Yeah. And I want to reiterate, I don't expect anyone to listen to this, and this is really just about our marriage. I hope we're doing this when we're 90. If we're still together.
Yeah.
Would you say we've had it's been 5 years since we kind of wrapped on podcasts, or maybe 4. I have a few questions around that. First of all, how does it feel to you that we're like back in the saddle?
Good. Here's the thing I wanted to say before we jump into these questions. You're saying this is just for our marriage, which is good, but I want to let you know that there's something about the context that even if just one person is listening, I feel a little safer bringing up some things that normally if I might bring up, you might just dismiss. So I feel a safety here that it gives me a little bit more freedom of things that you might be forced to listen to.
What are you talking about? Me dismissing?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
I mean, like say if I brought up something super mundane that I wanted your feedback about, you might dismiss it. But now, because we have headphones and a microphone on, you might be forced to engage is all.
Okay.
So I just wanted to preface that because it's related to what you just said a minute ago.
Okay, you're coming in with some aggressive kind of accusatory energy out the gate, which brings me actually nicely to my next question. Would you say that in the last 4 years, has our marriage faced any challenges?
I haven't felt heard. I'm totally kidding. Has our marriage faced any challenges directly or indirectly related to that we haven't been sitting down weekly to talk on a podcast? Is that the question, sort of?
No, I just want to take the temperature of where you think we're at marriage-wise and how things have gone the last 4 years.
What a doozy for episode Doozy. You know what? If I'm going to be totally honest, I think I'm pretty darn happy in our marriage, and I think the last 2 years, I hate to say this for the people listening, that the old pandy drove them apart. Mm-hmm. I think if anything, it brought us even closer together.
I agree. I feel like the last 2 years made me realize we really can get through some stuff. And there were things also going on in our lives, not pandemic related. Of course, the pandemic exacerbated. I mean, like everyone, it's been 2 years. Life still happens, but we've faced some challenges in other ways. I've had 2 surgeries in the last 2 years that's a big thing. I feel like there are a couple things that I was talking about this with Terry, my boss, on the show I work on. What would you say to your kids before they get married to someone? That be sure you experience these things with that person before making the call. And to me, one of them is certainly have sex with them and know what your sexual chemistry is like.
You hear that, Christians?
Travel with them, and not in a travel in ways where it's not like an all-inclusive resort. Like, go to cities and see how you guys function together traveling.
Interesting. Like it.
And get into an argument and come out on the other side of it. Like, I would be very wary of marrying someone that you had never gotten into a big argument with and seeing how you deal with conflict together. Although that can certainly be worked on. I think you and I have become really good at navigating conflict. And actually, I had the thought recently, like, sometimes we go so long without major conflict that we almost get like rusty. So when conflict rears its head, we need to kind of like dive back into the toolbox to figure out how to work through it. But another one is like, see how the other person handles true like sickness. And I don't mean like a cold or something. I mean, I know we joke about like, I'm not sensitive to, you know, you have a cut or something or whatever, but like,
yeah, you don't really, I have to be really hurt for you to acknowledge it.
That's not true at all.
Isn't that what you just said?
No. Well, it's interesting because I think that I take very good care of you if you're truly sick and there's something major. But sometimes there's something that you'll be legitimately worried about. Like, you had a cut that, or a burn.
I still have.
That
You
you
seen
still have
this?
the scar.
Look at that.
And I didn't treat it as such, like a serious thing. But also, I will say the reverse of that is, if there's ever a bang or something where I'm like, it could have been an accident that hurt you, I'm immediately like, are you okay?
Oh, yeah. And
And
I'm not.
often I will have a bang where I'm like, I could be laying here bleeding out. And not my husband, not my 2 kids has checked in on me.
Yeah, but I'm pretty like, bangs don't really rattle me where, yeah, a little bang. Yeah, you're very sensitive to bangs, which is nice.
But anyway, the way you cared for me through my 2 surgeries.
There were 2?
Yes, indeed, there were. See, it warms my heart that you don't even remember, because
I
you
remember
had to do it all.
Well, I had to do it all for your back surgery. That was major.
I had spine surgery and also, but even, 2021 was a doozy for me. In around the beginning of April, I started to have sciatica. I'm wearing my sciatica that looks like Metallica t-shirt right now. And for those of you who haven't experienced this, which I also thought was something relegated for like 80-year-olds, where it was like arthritis. It's really actually very common.
That might have been really offensive to people with arthritis.
No, people who have arthritis. By the way, now I'm like, people who have chronic pain.
Yeah.
Yes. I didn't mean to say that in a dismissive way. I meant that it was
You were
like,
trying to sound like an old person saying it?
Yes.
Oh, okay, cool.
Chronic pain, I have a new understanding of. And we've talked about this. I have experienced a bit of pain in my life.
Yeah, you have a high threshold in many ways. So you complaining about the sciatica, I was like, oh, shit.
And it was 4 months straight. And I can't fathom how hard it must have been on you, on top of the fact that you already, in our family, the person who sacrificed more than anyone by a landslide, it was you to get us through this pandemic.
Well, I just had more time with the kids because you were working full time.
Yeah, but, that just happened to be the case during this time in our work. Like, you and I alternate who's working and when and who's on, just by virtue of my job where I had to show up every day between set hours meant that you had to sacrifice your work.
Yeah.
And so you were already doing that. Then the sciatica kicked in. It turns out I had a herniated disc, which I went down this like crazy mind fuck thing about like the pain is all in your head thing, which I actually think made it so much worse. I was listening to these podcasts and
we've never talked about this. Ooh.
Have we not?
We've never, well, might get real interesting. We've never talked about my thoughts on all of that.
Oh, because you had to just be
play
supportive.
it cool. I had to play it cool the whole time.
So I actually, and I was on
Go into that in a little more in depth of what you're talking about.
Okay, let me just give the overview, then we'll go back. I went through 4 months of straight, nonstop, increasingly excruciating pain where I couldn't see straight. I couldn't sleep more than 2 hours at a time. I never really slept. I would get up at 4 o'clock because the first few hours in the morning when your discs are kind of expanded, it was the worst pain. I was crawling to go pee. I've never told you this, but I couldn't sit because sitting was so painful. I one time just peed on our bath mat because I couldn't even get up.
Not for fun?
It was so painful, and I couldn't be present in our lives, even the limited time it was. I put everything to being able to maintain like some semblance of continuing to be an employee at work. So you guys got like truly the worst of me. I mean, I was faking it so much for you and the kids, which was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Finally, the whole thing, like there's an entire industry committed to making people who have sciatica and disc problems think that it's in their heads or you can overcome it without surgery. And there's this very negative view of surgery for some reason in this community. There are all these books dedicated. And some people, I mean, the vast majority of people who have sciatica, it's like a month-long thing and it passes. But for those of us where it just gets increasingly intense, I had 2 cortisone shots that I thought were going to be the magic cure. So every time I was doing all these exercises, it was crazy. And finally, I was put in touch with an amazing surgeon. She did me up good. But then there's this massive risk for especially the first 6 weeks after of reherniating.
Yeah.
You have to get out of bed a certain way. You're supposed to just walk. You cannot even think about bending over. I couldn't even bend over the amount it takes to spit my toothpaste out. I'd have a cup to spit that out. I had grabbers for everything. I had hooks to put clothes on. It was like, and so I couldn't unload dishes. I couldn't carry anything. I had to stand up and eat. I didn't sit for 8 weeks after the surgery. And so you floated us, and seeing that that's how you care for me, because there are all these statistics about like husbands who leave their wives when they get cancer. You're not one of those. And I feel like the way you've supported us and our family through this and then supported me through that makes me feel safer than I've ever felt in
that's sweet.
A relationship.
So the hard part for me, and I'm curious what that timeline was before surgery. How long were you in the misery before surgery was on the table? And once surgery was on the table, you got in like 2 weeks later, right? Like I remember that.
It was a week. Oh my gosh, it was so fast.
But what was the timeline before that? I mean, are we talking 3-4 months, 5 months? What was it before surgery? It
was 4 months because it started in April. So I had like my face surgery in May. I had throat surgery, and while they did that, they fixed my deviated septum that was so deviated I couldn't even breathe. It wasn't, I mean, unfortunately, my nose still looks the same from the outside, but on the inside, they like made it, that recovery was in many ways more painful than the spine recovery.
It's so funny. I can't even like remember the recovery aspect of that.
Remember I had tubes?
Oh, yeah.
But it was so uncomfortable. But then a couple of weeks after that surgery, they take these tubes out of your nose, and I felt like the sensation was like, it felt like I had a huge gaping hole in front of my face. Like the amount of wind that was coming in. Now it doesn't feel that way, but because my nose hadn't been used to breathing for so long.
Yeah.
But I remember those pre-op and post-op appointments, I couldn't even sit in the chair that the doctor, like, going in for my face surgery.
Yeah.
And then, so it was 4 months leading up because my spine surgery was end of July.
Got it. Those were the hardest months for me, for sure, because it was all unknown and you were miserable and there was not much that I could, there's nothing I could do basically. And then, so that what was hard for me is once you latched onto the it's all in your head thing, you did not want to hear anything else. And I was skeptical about it because I feel like I have a pretty good balance of like science versus like what's in your head. And I think a lot of people's back problems, I think a lot of it is the mind. And I think what you were going through too, I think the mind could for sure help. But what I couldn't understand was like we would talk, and this was after you had found out like there's something wrong. Like this is...
I had an MRI.
Yeah, you had an MRI. This thing is wrong. And granted, and to everybody that has back problems that's hearing and screaming at me right now, I understand like A, surgery doesn't work for a lot of people. B, like everyone's results in recovery are different. C, sometimes these mind things completely work for people and it's the only thing that works for people. But you latched onto it in a desperate way because you were completely desperate, which was hard for me to see because you were in such pain. But I couldn't quite ever reconcile it just being like, but there's something wrong. Like, wouldn't you want to get that? Like, isn't there, like, there's legitimately something that could maybe be fixed. And so it was hard for me. And some of the brain, or some of this school of thought gets intense too. Like, you were listening to the podcast 2 hours, 3 hours a day. Because
it was the only thing that gave me hope at the time.
Right.
Which is so ridiculous. I mean, going back to like last week when I was like, Christians, and also not just Christians, but like Republicans and the far right people, I don't mean the leadership who I think are evil. I mean the people who are exposed to disinformation. I mean, like all of Russia right now are being told this thing. So they're behind this war that's all based on, and it's, I fell prey to this because I needed to, and I was desperate. And the trick of it is, I mean, this is a trick of everything. This is another non sequitur. It reminds me of like the voiceover coach who groomed me. The way he did that well is because what he was doing was not true. Like he was teaching me things that are real. But he was using it in a manipulative way.
Right.
And in this case, even my surgeon blatantly says, you know, pain is actually a brain signal. It's not, the pain is not happening in the place of your body where you feel it.
Yeah.
And stress, it's like scientifically proven, like stress or anxiety or whatever makes pain bigger than it is.
Right.
And this is why like during childbirth, like going to that meditative place and knowing trusting everything's fine, like makes the pain less intense.
Yeah.
And so but this goes to my like black and white thinking about things. I mean, and again, it's a miracle I never joined a cult.
Yes. Because
and luckily, I'm going to knock on wood, I do feel like I'm at the place in my life where I hopefully won't. But, you know, this is the other thing about it. I have friends who have taken this path, like with these exact people, the podcast I was listening to, and it did work for them. And it's pain that had no like medical explanation that had ruined their lives for years.
Yeah.
And so I don't dismiss it as a whole.
Yeah.
But a lot of people with sciatica, the whole thesis is like a lot of people are walking around with slip disc and they don't feel all this pain. So why
do you feel
do
this
you
pain?
feel it?
Yeah.
It's in your mind.
Yep.
And where I went really wrong, which actually like today's main practitioners in this space don't abide or don't recommend this. It was like the old school original OG book about this stuff that I read, which was like, you need to train your brain that you're not a victim, like you're not in pain. So bend over, do all these things, like force your body into the pain, lean into the pain basically.
Right.
And I'm sure that just made everything so much worse. But what I find ridiculous is surgery was really not that big. It was a big deal in the sense of recovery was hard because I couldn't do things that I felt great. Like I felt like I could do.
Yeah.
But I went into surgery in a like 9 out of 10 pain, and I came out with 0 pain. I could cry thinking about it right now. It was amazing. It was miraculous. And the recovery was not really all that painful. And I was off the pain meds the next day.
Oh yeah, that's right. You didn't take them at all.
And so I don't know why I was so resistant to this obvious fix. But for some reason in that world, and I think actually what the answer is that there are people who have surgery, and it is a dangerous surgery if you're not in the good. If a surgeon nicks something in there, you could be forever changed.
Yeah.
And there are people it doesn't work for. And I cannot imagine. I mean, I was never having suicidal ideology, but I did have the thought, if someone told me I had to live the rest of my life like this, I would understand why someone would choose that. Like it was just so hard. And I think that the idea of surgery as a last resort, and if it doesn't work, then it's just darkness. Like it's, but I will say the surgery, I'm now 7 months out or whatever.
Yeah.
I still like, you know, I am now slowly doing things that I'm always careful about now. Like when I sit up in the car, maybe everyone doesn't know this. You're supposed to have your head like back against the headrest. You're not supposed to like lean forward. When I sit in my chair for work, like my posture is completely changed from what it used to be. I walk every day pretty much. I try not to lift my kids, but the few times I do, I'm really conscientious about how holding my core and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I still like it creeps back in.
Yeah, you get a little tinge.
I'm never gonna probably not have anything to do with that because now that part of my body is weaker than it once was. But anyway, so that must have been very hard for you. And I will say you navigated the supporting me. I had to buy into that because the whole thesis of that idea is that you have to buy into it.
That's what I had a biggest problem with, that I had to let you go through it, but it felt like a belief system that did feel culty.
Yes.
Like that you totally, and that you did not, I think I probably brought up like, tried to poke a few holes in the beginning in it. You made it very clear, like, do not poke holes in this, sort of. I couldn't
afford for
which makes sense,
doubt to creep in. And I will say, I mean, the podcast that I listened to, which I feel comfortable saying what it was, because before surgery, while I was listening to the podcast, it did help me with my pain because because of the scientific reasons of like not being stressed out, using breath work, using like imagination work, basically, for this podcast, Tell Me About Your Pain. But ultimately, when I went to my surgeon, I mean, it basically, the podcast, the reason I was listening to it all the time, it would, while I was listening to it, take me down from a 9 to an 8. It's not sustainable.
Yeah.
My surgeon basically said when she saw my MRI and saw the pain I was in, and also I was starting to have weakness, like I was losing muscle in this leg.
Yeah.
she said you have two options: surgery or learn to live with it.
Jesus.
And that was all I needed to hear. Well, at that point, I was like begging for surgery.
Well, you were at the end of your rope. But anyway, so that whole time was the hardest part for me. Then the surgery, obviously, I'm super nervous. You know, it's a big deal. So that was really hard. But then once you were on the other side of that, as annoying as it was that you were laying down for 3 months? How long was it?
Yeah.
It was, I was like, that part was easy.
Really?
Yeah, because I knew you were going to be fine.
Having me back mentally?
Yeah, and you were totally back mentally, and like, yeah, I just had to do a bunch of laundry. Do you know what I mean?
You did.
Do you know what I mean? Like I had no inner turmoil about it after that, because I wasn't worried about you anymore, and you weren't in agony anymore. So then it was just like we had a roadmap. I mean, there was some question marks, like there was fear of like fucking it up and like all that stuff, but that seemed so manageable to me compared to the unknown before. That was the scary part for me.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, did it ever cross your mind to just cut and run?
I mean, I stepped out of the marriage a little bit, but I was never going to leave. No, not at all. It does seem, what's interesting is like when you first brought up that like cancer statistic, which I'm curious what that statistic is of like husbands leaving their wives, that seems so absurd and like you got to be a real piece of shit to do that. But I wonder if there's like, I'm sure this is like a horrible thing. I'm saying 80% of men that do that are a piece of shit.
Yeah.
But then I bet there's like 20% of people that if we had video footage of like the life in the house and maybe how the person with cancer was handling it, it could be untenable maybe. Do you know what I mean? Like them just being like, I don't know how to like,
maybe.
But I think 80% total pieces of shit.
Yeah, I'm sure that's right, of course. But I also think similar to the pandemic, like we were saying, you and I have come out of it even stronger. I have 3 close friends who have gotten divorced during this.
Yeah.
And I do think I think for so many people, it's illuminated, like everyone's having existential crises through this. Like okay, we only have this one life. Seeing that like our kids' introduction to life now involves this weird thing that luckily our kids, and I think most kids, are very resilient and, you know, but they will absorb the energy of all the adults who have been really affected by this. And I think adults that were stuck together in the house had to have reckonings.
Yeah.
And I do think that the people, you know, where there were cracks in the foundation, just it became clear that it wasn't going to work out and they might as well separate during this and get on with it and get on with their lives. And then people who had strong foundations, I think, had to work together in new ways. And I think that something as big as cancer, similarly, you know, it's these huge life moments that really shake things. But what I find interesting is the husband versus the wife. And obviously we're talking about people in heteronormative relationships where I'm like, why is it that the husbands leave at such a higher rate than the wives?
Yeah, I would love to hear what that statistic is.
I mean,
but I think there is if we're talking about like gender stereotypes and whatnot, there's a nurturing motherly thing that obviously is top of mind, which I'm sure there's some science to back that up. But yeah, I'm sure it's drastic, the difference in those statistics.
I think the other big reason, this is based on nothing other than just theorizing, but women typically, especially at the age when cancer usually hits, have invested in outside friendships in a way that men haven't. And when you're dealing with something like that, you need someone outside of yourself, whether it's a therapist or friends or whatever, to talk to and talk about it. That's not the person who's going through it. And I think that probably emotionally women have this support system outside of the home that men don't.
Yeah.
And so anyway.
Well, hopefully neither of us will get the cans.
I mean, odds are not, I don't have anything wooden, but like odds are not in my favor.
You should find some wood.
hand me
that frame.
Okay.
Is that wood?
It's probably not.
Okay.
We're going to look back on this and be like, she did not knock on wood. Thank you. But that's to be discussed.
Yeah, well, I do think we have a pretty good sense of, I think we'd be pretty good in all those scenarios. I think I think we would both handle everything with grace. I mean, you sure did through all this stuff. I wouldn't be too worried about that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I think we've been together long enough, and even what we're just talking about now, what you went through and how we both handled it, it makes me pretty confident that we would get through stuff like that.
Were you ever worried that I wouldn't get fixed?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Oof, that's intense. Andy.
Yeah. But I think there was a part of me, if I'm going to be totally honest, that I knew you were so opposed to the idea of surgery and even physical therapy that I think in the back of the mind, I was like, it's just a matter of time before that's on the table as like something to explore.
Yeah. Well, and I also want to say the reason I was opposed to physical therapy is that my one experience with it before with my knee really was just a time and money suck. Like it did not really help me, I didn't think. And I will say after my surgery, I did do physical therapy and I also don't think it helped me. Like, I don't know. I know it's so therapist dependent and I know there are amazing PTs out there and, you know, our kids have experienced amazing PTs for different things, but and there were so many horror stories online of physical therapists not understanding this and making it worse.
And I knew you would never, I just knew there would be more. I knew you would have, like, you were in such misery that I knew we were going to look at every option possible. So in that regard, I did have some like faith, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it kept getting so bad that it was like, we're going to have to fucking figure something out.
I do wish you just said, I think you said you handled it gracefully, me. I really don't feel like I did. Like, this is one time in my life that I wish, and I'm not talking about like getting on board with the it's all in your head stuff or whatever. I'm talking about just the pain. You know, I faked it as much as I could. And I know this is a silly thing to look back on, but I would like to think, you know, I look at my mom dealing with terminal cancer and how much pain she was probably in. And I'm sure she was faking it, but she did have a grace about it. Not that we didn't see her in pain. Of course, that would be, she wasn't phony, but I don't feel like I handled it very gracefully, and in the sense of, I feel like I really became an incredibly negative, asshole.
But I think that I think that can happen with anything when we're talking, it could probably happen with cancer and all this stuff. But I think in your journey of exploring all this stuff, it's really common with backs. Like people don't understand how acute the pain can get.
Yes.
And so I think for the pain, I never doubted your pain because I've seen the kidney stone. I witnessed you pass it.
Well,
you didn't even realize it was a kidney stone.
Tell that story.
You were just like one morning, like you had been having, how would you describe the pains like in the night? Like,
I felt like I had like a UTI for kind of a month, and I had gone to a bladder specialist who thought I had some sort of syndrome and gave me medication that didn't work, and they did an ultrasound. Like, this is so crazy. And I kind of was like, well, I guess I'll just kind of hope it goes away. And then one morning I woke up at like 5 a.m. and my go-to when I'm in pain, this is the other thing with my spine, being in the bath because you have to sit was not an option. And that's my like one place that I pretty much always find relief from whatever, if I'm feeling sick and I went and got in the bath and I was having these waves of pain that was very similar to childbirth. I literally, we know I wasn't pregnant and you had a vasectomy, but I literally was like, was there like a twin left in there that it was so wild because it felt like contractions. And I finally got out of the bath and I was like, okay. And I came in, you were just waking up and Teddy had gotten into bed with you to wake up. And I was like, I need to go to the emergency room. Something is really wrong. And then I just went to pee.
Yeah.
And I heard blop and felt instant like relief. And also like the dam had broken. Like I had been trickling pee, which was why I was like, this has got to be a UTI. And then I look in the toilet and I fished it out.
Yep.
And I come in and I'm like, I think I need stone.
Yeah. And I said, what do you mean? And you're like, I pulled this out of the toilet and you showed it to me. And I was like, there's no way that's a kidney stone. That's too big. That were my exact words.
Yeah.
I didn't, and kidney stones weren't on my mind before. Like I hadn't heard you tell me that.
Me neither.
Like, right.
No. Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, there's no way that's a kidney stone. And sure enough, you had a huge kidney stone when you went to the doctor. You took it with you.
And he said he was embarrassed.
I bet he was.
And he was like, I didn't even look for that because people with that are in the fetal position in my office crying. So we're establishing I have a very high threshold.
Yeah, you're champ giving birth to our kids, kidney stone. So yeah, I knew the pain was real. So I never was doubting that.
But this brings me to something that I also would like to talk on my future podcast that I'm not sharing yet. But the fact that I feel like my personality changed so much, where maybe I was faking it enough on the outside that it didn't feel this way, but I felt like I became just a raging, miserable, negative, like curmudgeon-y bitch.
You had moments of like being super irritable for sure.
But what does that say about like our souls and our spirits? That something like pain for a few months, massive pain, can alter who you are in such a major way?
Because you're fucking in pain.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But
it sucks.
It makes me, I don't know, it makes me question like.
That kind of gets to my point about the cancer thing of like there being a 20% of people that if you saw footage of the scenario and you're like, wow, this partner is like not handling this with grace in a way that like there's nothing for this poor bastard to do. Like he can't, you know what I mean? Again, 80% of the time, pieces of shit that leave. But I'm saying that I bet there are cases where people get in these predicaments and it really alters them drastically in like a very sad, negative way.
Well, I think there are other things too that, you know, like early onset Alzheimer's or early onset dementia.
I'm very worried about that stuff.
Not early onset, just those things. They can alter someone's personality in a way that they are very hard to be around.
Sure.
But I think the answer for us is that we both would stay in it to the bitter end and support each other, which is really reassuring, I have to say.
Yeah.
What would you, going back to my question about, what would you tell our kids you think it's important for them to experience with the partner before getting married?
I think you hit most of them. It made me think, you know, I had a relationship before we met where we got in a bad car accident.
Oh, yeah.
and how that person handled it. I mean, within the 12 hours, I knew it was over.
And how was that?
Just in a fucking shitty way. Like showed no gratitude for being alive and not crazy fucked up hurt. And I was surrounded by to paint a picture of it, I was in a car accident with 6 friends.
And explain what happened, because it was gnarly. It was on the news.
Yeah.
It was
We were driving down. This was in Montana, and we were driving down like a rural highway, so it was just one lane. And we were going to go inner tubing down a river, and so there was who was in the front?
Trell.
Oh, so there was friends in a pickup truck in front of us with the inner tubes in the back of the pickup truck. So, and 2 or 3 people in that car, and then 4 people in the car that I was in, and so 2 of us in the back, and driver, passenger, shotgun, and we were slowing down to make a left turn to where the river was, but we're on a just one lane highway, so we have to wait. And there was an RV behind us that didn't see us stop. So an RV just plowed into us and rolled over our car and off the side of the road to the right. And like the RV flipped. Like,
wow.
And amazingly enough, the person that got messed...
Were you in that car in the middle?
I was in... So what was crazy was... Yes, I think I was in the middle... I can't remember if I was in the middle or the right, to be honest, but in the back seat on the left, I don't remember if it was inner tubes or just stuff that we had so much stuff that we were bringing that no one was sitting there, which is a miracle.
Because they would have died.
They would have been completely fucked. The person that got most injured was the driver. So if you can imagine the person right in front of that seat, my buddy Trell got most, really had back problems and surgery, and anyways, so he got messed up the most. In a miracle, the rest of us got banged up, cuts and stuff like that. And it was super surreal, slow motion.
Oh my God.
Carried the girl I was dating out of the car to safety. Like, it was crazy. All that being said, though, and the people in the RV, miracle, all of them survived. But anyways, it's like a blur. And then the next thing you know, we're at the hospital. But every single person involved in this thing was so grateful to have survived and be alive. And in some ways, it was kind of a magical moment between all these friends of us. For everyone except the person I was dating, which that might have factored in because she didn't know these people as well.
Yeah.
But there was how they had framed this experience. I knew instantly, this was not going to...
What I'm asking is, how did she frame the experience? I understand that she didn't have it gratitude, but what?
There was no gratitude. There was a worry that her dad would find out that she was in a car accident, which seemed so irrelevant to me.
Why?
I don't know. I couldn't that her was stewing on the idea that her dad would find out that she was in a car accident.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that plus the no gratitude, and there was just a vibe. Then the next 24 hours being around all these people that were in this shitty experience, and just seeing how everyone was dealing with it.
And also, one of your friends was pretty seriously injured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, but that's the most close example in my life where it's just oh yeah, we're not on the same page with this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Susie, I hope you're doing well.
Susie. Oh man.
But I mean, I guess the unfair thing in all of this, I'm putting this person on blast sort of, is, I don't know, this shit is hard though. You know what I mean? You just don't know how you're it's gnarly, but I do feel I don't know. I feel like you and me can handle that stuff. I feel like I handled when you gave birth to our son in the car really well.
You did.
Like in those moments, I can come together and focus.
You can. You
and
are
not freak out.
Reliable in crisis, 100%. And I will say to your story about Susie, me hearing that she's focusing on being nervous that her dad's going to find out that she was in an accident that she had nothing to do, like she had no part in creating. I'm like, oh, there's some shit in that family. And like for her to be scared about her dad finding out, and instead of knowing that her dad would obviously find out about this and be like, thank God you're okay. And
yes. I'm
like, I don't fault her for that reaction, because this is, again, it's like a primitive reaction you have in these situations where you really don't know how you will react until you're in them. But I do think it's telling, like, you don't need to sign up for that person's baggage. I mean, we all have deal breakers within our realms. And so, point being, I don't fault her for that reaction, but also don't fault you for knowing that was not
for me,
for you.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate, as you were saying that, because of what my mom went through, I opted not to have a hospital birth, in part because I've hated hospitals so much.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But the spine surgery, gave me a very, very positive experience in the hospital.
The whole staff was so lovely.
Truly reset my feeling. And I will say that then after, having kids, I've spent some time in the hospital with our son.
Yeah.
Very traumatic also.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate that this surgery has kind of recolored my experience of hospitals. Like that first day after my surgery, I truly think of as one of the best days of my life, because I was on really good drugs. Everyone was taking care of me.
Yeah.
I got, I'm going to paint this picture. I now know why sleep deprivation is torture. I hadn't slept in 4 months, and I slept in that hospital room nothing, it felt like the most refreshing, wonderful sleep. And so I'm now back on board with hospitals.
I wonder, it'd be interesting to ask nurses, they're seeing people in their most vulnerable state. Mm-hmm. And I think for a lot of people, it makes a lot of people sweet, right? But then there's probably patients that just can't, that go the complete opposite. I wonder, it would be cool to ask a nurse, what do you think the percentage of that is in your experience? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you hear all these horror stories during COVID of people bitching out nurses who are overstretched, overworked, underappreciated, underpaid, people going off on them. And also in many of the cases I heard about, it was because they denied that COVID existed, and really sad stuff. But I do think that I'd be very curious about that too. Remember how after my surgery at the cabin that...
Oh my fucking God.
We just couldn't catch a break. That was a month. No, that was 6 weeks.
Yeah, we'd gotten...
It was my birthday.
We'd gotten a new pull-out sofa, and I couldn't get the pull-out to work, and we're looking at it and trying to figure it out, and we tipped this thing on its side, and then I can't remember if it was you or me, we're ooh, it looks like there's some twine there, we need to cut the twine, and thank God it wasn't 100% my fault.
No, it wasn't.
Or I wouldn't have been,
the guilt.
That's maybe the worst I've ever felt in also, that moment.
Thank God, our kids weren't, it could have been so much worse.
Anyway, somehow, mostly my fault, but with your green light, we had set this thing up in a way that it's on its side, And then I had the scissors in my hand and I just clip this twine and this fucking pull-out thing shoots out the
And it's
metal
like,
right into your
you know,
Elizabeth's shins.
however many hundreds of pounds of metal that had
God.
been spring-loaded went right into my shins and really fucked him up. And I'm kind of amazed didn't break something.
I mean, but you were in so much pain that we were like, oh, fuck, like your legs are shattered. Like like could have been so much worse, knock on wood.
Yeah.
But yeah, ended up, it was just a really gnarly bruise. But for that first hour, it was like, what did I do?
Also, we were in the cabin and we had no idea, like, where do we go? Which
we
is something we need to figure out.
Well, yeah, we like called locals that have lived there for 12 years and they're kind of like, I don't know. Well, let's see what the best option might be. You could go here, but big caveat, or you could go here, big caveat. Like there was no like answer.
Where would we, if we were up there and there was something, an emergency, like with the kids, where would we take them?
I think number one, you would call the fire department or 911. And you'd hope that those people near us, like a fire station, that they're trained in paramedic stuff.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. So I think that's the answer. If something's really bad, that would be the move. If not, we can talk about a couple options off air later.
Okay.
But I think if something like really bad, I think that's what you would do. And you'd hope those firemen got the skills.
Well, I do feel like the pandemic and also us being up in the cabin has illuminated something for me, which, at the beginning of the pandemic, like you couldn't get flour and you couldn't get toilet paper.
Yeah.
And all of the stuff that we take for granted, that we just assume is always available to us. And to this day, they're like, you go to the grocery store and it's like...
Hold on. Did someone just knock on our door?
I didn't hear it. Anyway, but being up at the cabin in this small town, it's like there's like the one plumber and there's the one blah, blah, blah. This is what... Remind me next time we do this, because I know we have to wrap up. Yeah. We should talk about this part of it. Did we talk about like the pipes in the cabin last episode? I don't remember, but I guess it doesn't matter because this is just for us. Anyway, so more to come, but this is fun.
Yes. We're done.
I think we're done.
We're done.
And I think what I want to do is release these 2 episodes and then start releasing the episodes every Wednesday.
Oh, that's cool.
So there's that. And you'll keep me posted on it if no one's listening, as we suspect, or if some people might be based on iTunes comments.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, cool. All right.
Good night.
Good night. Shh.